Today I was going to talk a few minutes about Justify, the Triple Crown winner that um, they just announced retired from racing. Um, Justify was a beautiful horse, and um, I I know it's all about money, but I didn't think they would retire the horse. I figured that we could keep watching him after he won the Triple Crown. Like another horse, American Pharaoh, won it, but he kept running for a while, and that gave the public time to go out and look at Justify run in case they didn't see him before. I'm not an expert on horse racing, but I have been there. Like when I was 5 to 6 years old in Wheeling, West Virginia, where we lived, my father took me to Wheeling Downs every single day at 2 o'clock. So I knew all the horses, all the jockeys. In fact, the owner, Bill Lyas of the racetrack, I knew him. So I was real familiar with the horses and all the jockeys, but I was real young. All we had to do was drive across the bridge from where our business was in town. We'd be at Wheeling Downs. But I don't think I saw a horse at Wheeling Downs like Justify. I mean, the horse is beautiful, really built, and he can run. Truthfully, I didn't think he'd win this last race in New York for the Triple Crown, because that race is about a half a mile longer than the first two that he won. And I didn't think he would win it. And they were also talking about he had a bad ankle. And then his trainer before that race said no. Bob Bafford said that his ankle was in good shape before that third race in New York, which he won. Now the same trainer is saying that he has inflammation in his left front ankle, and therefore he can't run in this race coming up, or the next race coming up, which has nothing to do with the Triple Crown, well, the Derby winners. One thing about it, which is amazing with Justify, is that he won the Triple Crown, and he became the first horse since 1882 to win a Kentucky Derby without having raced as a 2-year-old. And then he followed that with a Preakness victory, and then the third victory was in New York, May 16th. But it's funny though, 1882 until today. That means for some reason, as a 2-year-old, Justify never ran a race. In fact, I was trying to figure out the number of races that he won and ran in, and I think it was only about 6 races. So they would have had to have been, as a 3-year-old, which he's run this year. Now, I guess he ran a race or 2 when he was a year old, but scratch out 2. He never ran a race when he was 2 years old. I have no idea why that happened, and it hasn't happened since 1882. But this, another thing that's interesting about justify is this. There were all kind of people that owned him. And some of them owned him for the breeding rights. Like there were four groups that owed him for the breeding rights. And then there are some other groups that owned him for the racing rights. Naturally, the racing rights are over now. And
So he had like 10 people that owned him.
yeah, he had a lot of people that owned him. The owner of Windstar Farm, which owns Windstar Farm, owns the majority of Justify, and that also is a breeding and face and the racing rights, breeding and racing rights. Windstar, he's in both groups, and then the actual owner of the breeding rights, just breeding rights, and you send him around the world and he breeds with other horses, is Windstar Farms, China Horse Club, and SF Racings. So this was actually a $60 million deal with Coolmore. Coolmore is a breeding farm that also oversees American Pharaoh's sire duty. Now, I think they're charging, I'm trying to figure out what they're going to charge for him to breed, but the owners of the racing rights are Windstar, China Horse, and Chalk Starlight Racing, and the head of Plains Partners. So they're a little different. They own the racing rights, and the other group owns the breeding rights.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, now the racing rights, if he went into retirement, are over. So the only thing left would be the breeding rights. And I'm trying to figure what they're charging for him. I think it's $50,000 per live foal while there, and then he's going to go to Australia in the fall. They're going to send him to Australia in the fall for breeding with the horses there, and then each horse will pay that he breeds with. And so we're going to pay $50,000 there. I thought his price in the U.S. was $60,000 for breeding. So if you have a horse and you can get hooked up with all these different people that own them and companies, and say you want to breed your horse with Justify to, who knows, maybe turn your horse into a runner. I think the charge on that is $60,000. American Pharaoh, they tried to get $200,000 after he won the Triple Crown a few years ago. But they have it all figured out, the money he's going to make. They're saying that he's worth $60 million now. It's justified.
Wow.
I guess with $60 million, most people wouldn't run him, figuring he might get hurt or that ankle might flare up or something like that. But it's really big money, and it's amazing the number of people and companies that are involved in it. You just see a horse running down the street or on the track, and you figure, oh, that little girl over there owns that horse. No. There's 4 or 5 companies own the racing rights, And here there are 4 or 5 companies that own his breeding rights once they start breeding him. So there were a lot of people involved, and it's real interesting to see all these things. But when you look at this Justify, I mean, this horse is beautiful. I haven't seen a horse like him, and he can run. I was sure that horse would have a problem in New York. And frankly, I said he would lose in New York on the triple because New York is a half mile longer than the Kentucky Derby in that second race. I didn't think he could win there because the last horse that ran that Triple Crown race, 1-2, got to New York. I went to New York to that track, and that horse got killed because of the length of the race. And these 3 races are all real close together, a few weeks apart. So, and you have a whole group of people coming, horses. Some of the horses don't run in the first race, they'll save them for the third. Or some of them don't run in the first, they put them in the second. So you're going to have the toughest competition in the world in these 3 races. And if you could win all 3 of them like he did, I mean, that's something, really something, in my opinion. In New York, the crowd was 90,000 to watch him win the Triple Crown, that third race. But I must say that with all the things, another thing, Justify's only earned $3.8 million, which isn't much for a horse with his credentials. But when you read this and you follow him, in my opinion, he's one of the best horses that there ever was. And frankly, if I was in the business, I would pay $50,000 in a minute to get him to mate with my horse. Because I've seen so many horses, like when my dad would take me, I was 5 to Wheeling Downs. I mean, you know, there are horses like you see out in the pasture. They were nice looking horses, and they would saddle them up. It was no big deal. Not like this horse. I mean, this horse is the cream of the crop.
Wow.
Thank you.
How is it guaranteed, though, that the horse, if you breed it with him, that you'll get a horse the same as that one? I mean...